forgot I was playing the European version. It's Adventure Island Classic. So this game came out, I believe, 1980. I want to say maybe 1987. So this is definitely a game I was a little surprised to see had a release date anywhere in 1992. It seems like this would probably be a little bit too old for that. So I have a little more of a history with today's game than I had with games in previous episodes. Of course, this is excluding Super Mario 2 and Michael Jackson's Moonwalker. But this is mainly due to Adventure Island still being on my NES pile of shame, if there still is such a thing here in 2014. There's only one question I really have about that, though. If there's a pile of difficult games that I haven't beaten, so these aren't really games that, you know, I just kind of let build up over the years, kind of like my Steam library. These are games that are just like, I sort of have this obsession with beating games that are very difficult, and that list kind of just continues to go. But they're not really games that I feel I have to finish or have to go through, I guess. They're just difficult games that are just kind of in my brain, where I'm thinking at some point I'm going to get around to actually playing this and beating it. You know, I think the most recent difficult game I went through was actually Kid Icarus. That was the last one I beat. I've gotten pretty close to finishing this game. I got to like level, I think it was like area 7-2. So there's still about like 6 stages left. But this game just became way too much for me. I mean, even with Infinite Continues, if you get the Hudson Bee, I think at the end of this level, you can continue as many times as you want, but the game just becomes way too hard. And this game it's been kind of eating away at me for a few years. I don't think I'll ever really be able to, there's the Hudson Bee right there. I don't think I'll ever really be able to finish it, ever. But I don't know, maybe somewhere down the line I'll actually go through with it, but who knows if that'll ever really happen or not. But again, just kind of getting back to the pile of shame thing, does that really count? You know, I've always been kind of curious about that. Not that anybody has to have an answer for that. I don't really care, but it's just kind of an interesting sort of philosophical question, I suppose. As far as Hudson Adventure Island goes, I feel that this was a game that you either loved or you hated when you were a kid. If you loved it, it was probably due to the fact that you were grateful for just having another game to play. You know, for some people, it's just very difficult to get new games when you're, you know, 5, 6 years old and you don't have any money to buy them. So you're basically just relying on your parents through either just their good nature, or you know, maybe you actually did something worthwhile that would allow you to get a new game. That's mainly how you would get those there. But I could also understand if a person didn't like this game, because I think it's right around, at least for me, the turning point that I knew that the relationship with this game was going to be pretty rough was right around Area 3. I always felt that this game kind of lured you into a false sense of security, because the first 2 worlds are actually pretty, not easy, but you know, they're playable. It's not too difficult, but the difficulty right around Area 3 just ramps up like exponentially. So it was right around that time that you just understood that this game is going to break you in the most brutal way possible. Hudson Adventure Island is a game that actually has a pretty complicated backstory. It was an adaptation of Wonder Boy, which at the time was an arcade game published by Sega. Both Wonder Boy and Adventure Island sort of became their own franchises. Wonder Boy became more of like a platforming action RPG, and Adventure Island stuck to mostly just being a platformer. There were a couple of exceptions to to Adventure Island, sticking to that mold, there was Adventure Island 4, which was never released here in the United States, that took on more of like an action RPG role, kind of like what Wonder Boy did. And then there was also Super Hudson's Adventure Island 2, which was released on the Super Nintendo right around the end of the Super Nintendo's life cycle. I think it was right around 95 or 96. I won't get into the whole backstory here, because it's pretty complex. There's a lot of like licensing stuff and things of that nature. But if you're interested in digging into it a little bit further, I would definitely suggest checking out episode 10 of Chrontendo, which is a video blog that's all about the history of the Famicom, Nintendo Disk System, and the Nintendo Entertainment System, and it's all about the games that came out or it's basically all about games being explained in chronological order based on when they were released. They actually do a pretty good job of kind of tapping into the whole Wonder Boy Adventure Island thing. It's pretty quick, but it's actually done pretty well. So you get a little bit of a history lesson, without having the whole, without being beaten over the head with the whole backstory of it. It is pretty interesting, but at the same time, it's pretty complicated. There's a lot of branching paths and stuff like that, as far as like who got to do what and who kept what franchise, and what character belonged to this person, and so on and so forth. It is pretty interesting. I kind of pointed this out before. Hudson's Adventure Island has a history of being unapologetically difficult. Whether it's its checkpoint system, whether it's for me personally, it's really enemy placement. I think it's something that at least in the first couple of stages, everything seemed kind of fair and well played, kind of like fairly spaced out and stuff like that. But as you kind of progress further into the game, even as early as I think level, there's actually an example, I think right around the middle of level 2, where it's really just about like enemy placement. I heard, somebody tried to point out that Adventure Island was more a game based on enemy patterns and stuff like that, which is more akin to games like Contra, where the enemies kind of follow the same path and stuff like that. I kind of disagree with that to an extent. Contra, if Contra was a platformer, I could kind of see where someone would try to make that comparison. But Contra is kind of more, left to right scrolling, and the enemies will basically follow the same patterns each time. I know that Adventure Island is not exactly random, but I think as far as the way the enemies are placed on the screen, and in the checkpoint system, I think is actually pretty cruel as well. So right now, I do have a weapon, but if I were to die, I would then lose the weapon and would have to reacquire the stone axe to continue to make progress. So there's actually a fair series of areas where you will not have a weapon, and you are expected to kind of get through sort of like an enemy gauntlet with nothing but just the ability to jump. And I think that's just makes this game just one of the many reasons that this game is just incredibly difficult. Unless you get the Hudson Bee at the end of the first stage, like I did probably about 5 or 6 minutes ago, there is no official way to continue in this game. So basically, there's 32 stages, there's 8 areas with 4 stages each. You only have 3 lives, and you're basically expected to go through the whole game that way. Now, I'm sure it's possible, but for somebody who's not completely obsessed with every element of what this game has to offer, chances are you're probably not going to get through it in just 3 lives. It's just way too hard. So at the end of the 4th stage, you'll fight a boss, as I kind of showed you not that long ago. The 4th stage is always going to be a forest level, and it's going to be the forest at night. So actually here, I think right after this part's going to be an example of the enemy placement that I was talking about. So you'll go over a series of platforms, and at the end of the platform, you jump onto land, and once you land, there's a frog right there. So I actually did this again in slow motion. It's kind of stupid, but see, the frog is already jumping before I've landed. I somehow luckily jumped over the frog without getting hit. But that's kind of stuff like that that this game's kind of notorious for. So it's like, it's not really a pattern. It's more, I guess, really more just it's more based on timing, which still doesn't make the game any easier. But it's something you'll kind of see more and more often as you go through the game, especially if you play the game on an emulator. You just kind of save state, restore state, save state, restore state, and you do slowly pick up on the different, you do kind of pick up on the timing a little bit more, but it's still incredibly frustrating to die over and over and over again, and it's really just because the timing is just too difficult to get right. So going back into how the stages are broken down, they're broken down into a couple different environments. There's the forest during the day. There's the islands, which we saw stage 2-1 and stage 1-2. There are caves, mountains, which you're not really introduced to until stage 4. I think it's like believe it's stage 4-2 and extends to stage 4-3. The mountains are difficult because it's one of the few stages where there is not a lot of fruit, so that you have to move through the levels very, very quickly, which is actually going to bring me to the next point I have to make about this game. One of the unique features that this game has is the stamina system. So at the top of the screen, you see that there is what kind of looks like a life bar of sorts. That doesn't really seem to be moving down too much, but that's probably just because I'm collecting fruit. But basically, I think they call it the starvation meter. It may be more of a timer. I don't know, you can kind of call it whatever you want. I don't think anybody really cares. But the idea is you keep the meter going by collecting the fruit that you see along the way. Occasionally you'll find a hidden bottle of milk, which will fill up the meter completely. But the thing to kind of keep in mind is once that meter is depleted, you'll lose a life. So no matter how well you're doing in the level, once that meter is gone, you're gone. But it's not all doom and gloom. You know, you'll find plenty of items along the way that'll help you out. There's a lot of bonus items. You'll find rings, you'll find flowers. I thought the flower was supposed to be more of a power-up, but I don't really know what the effect of it is. I haven't really seen it do anything. So my only assumption is it's probably just points. So here I had actually died, so I was jumping over that area with no weapons. So that's basically one of the things I was talking about, is even though there is a checkpoint system, if you get stuck somewhere without a weapon, you're pretty much on your own. There are even some points where even after you continue, there's not necessarily a weapon right there at the beginning of the stage. You'll still need to make it a pretty far distance before you actually have access to one. So here's the mountain stage here. And it seems like the fruit and vegetables are pretty plentiful here, but you'll kind of go through long stretches where there's just nothing there. So as far as weapons go, you get the stone axe, which we're showing here. If you are able to find the right hidden eggs, you can also get fireballs, which you can actually go through rocks and boulders, which obviously makes perfect sense, right? So Adventure Island it's a game where it can be fun, but I think in a lot of cases it's just too difficult to be fun. One of the things I did notice about the way the character moves is it reminded me a lot of Mega Man from 1987, where the character moves well but still kind of slides, so it just feels a little like you don't always have complete control over the character. I think this is how this game would be a lot more, would be a little more enjoyable, I guess I should say, is if you felt that you had tighter control over the character. But overall, if you're curious about it, I definitely would suggest trying it. It may not end up being one of your favorite games, but you know, it does lead to some better sequels. Adventure Island 2, I think, is very underrated. And you know what? While you're at it, why not try Adventure Island 3 as well? Both 2 and 3 are probably going to be the best games in the series anyway. Super Adventure Island 1 and 2, you could probably skip over. I don't think you'll really be missing anything there. Super Adventure Island 1's pretty good, but it's not, I don't know, it's not great. I think 2 and 3 are definitely the best in the series. As far as this game goes, well, I don't think I'm ever going to beat it. So, you know what? See you in hell, Adventure Island. Meet me in 7-3. I'll be waiting.